Hello, good afternoon, I guess I should say. It is about 6 p.m. here, so good evening. Um, a lot of questions came up over the last year, especially when I was living in North India, about how I met and found a guru. Um, I've had a few different people fulfill that role, but only two I ever called Guruji. Patabi Joyce I called that because I only met him a few times, but on his tours in America. But he had a strong presence and his energy was there. You could tell that the work had been done, so he earned the right to be called that. But when I met Yoga Vidananda, that's when I knew he was the one for me when it comes to Tantra. I had already been learning with another person, but not ever quite thought of her that as the guru, as that word. But I also didn't really know that word very well. And it's a very Eastern word, and I was still immersed in living in America, so using that word wouldn't have been something I guess I would have done. So there's a little story of how I found my path to Guruji. It was maybe 2016 in Mysore. I had become friends with a guy who had done my astrology, my Vedic astrology, who lived there. He now doesn't live there anymore. He travels around a lot. Um, and at one point in time, and maybe it was 2017. I'm not sure of the year for sure. It doesn't really matter. But I was in India for a long time, and he was gone on a trip and had gone to Meenakshi. Meenakshi is a famous Devi temple in Tamil Nadu in Madurai. Um, and he said there was a table full of cards, like the size of business cards. I actually have the card he gave me, and I will show it to you. And he picked this one up, not sure what to do with it and why he was interested in it. And there it is. It's written in Tamil on there, so it's not like you can, read it unless you're Tamil or know Tamil, the Tamil language. Anyway, he wasn't sure why he picked it up. He just felt a strong urge to do so, and he didn't know what that meant. He was because he didn't want it for himself, but he thought, okay, I'll know the right time to give this to somebody. So we met, and I believe it was at Depth and Green for their anniversary party. Pushpir was there, and he had remembered he had done my chart the year before, and we hadn't become strong friends yet. So we talked, and he had remembered my chart from the year before. It was all kind of strange to me, and that from that point on is when we became friends. And I actually had him read my chart and do something. And then later in that same season that I was there is when he went on this trip and bought this got this little card. And so when he brought it, came back to Mysore a few weeks later, he saw me and he said, "Hey, I think I'm supposed to give this to you." And I looked at it and I didn't know who it was. I've never seen a goddess like that. And it was a little perplexing to me. But I knew that, he gave it to me because of the instinct to do so. So I thought, okay, the reasoning for this will come up when it's supposed to. Not right now, obviously. No big deal. And I put it on my altar. I carry my altar with me everywhere I go. And it was much smaller then. It's a little bit too big now. I need to kind of figure that out if I'm going to keep traveling because it's a lot to carry. Anyway, I put it on my altar. So I kept it, and I believe that was in 2017. I'm just going to pick that year. So I had it with me, and the goddess's name is Pratyangira. I had never heard of her. You can barely find anything when you Googled her back then. Now there's a bit more, but at the time there was hardly anything. So it was, say, a couple of years later, I had been in Goa and was sick, and that's a whole nother story. But came to Mysore to heal. I had gone through a few different situations and had some blood work done, and there's a whole lot of stuff. A lot of you who know me personally know these stories, so I don't need to get into them. But there was a girl who I befriended who is from Rajasthan, but she comes to Mysore to practice, and she happened to live in the US. One day we discussed something about going to a Pratyangara temple, and there's a big famous one in Tamil Nadu, right on the outside of Bangalore. So it's about a 3.5 hour drive from Mysore. So we decided to go. We rented a car, we went to this temple. This is the goddess that's on this card. And that was my interest because I couldn't really find much info on her. There, you couldn't find much info, but the temple had a lot of energy. It's a fairly new temple, but it was very strong presence in the place, so I was glad I went. That was in, say, April of 2019. Then in May, then June, my friend Ross comes, and a lot of you also who know me personally know Ross. He used to come every summer for 2 months during his regular jobs off season time, and so we would go to temples a lot. Well, I had been in Mysore a lot longer than I normally would, so I had discovered a few temples, and I decided I was going to take him to this one that I really love. It's in now I'm forgetting the name of that area, but I can tell you about it in person if we see each other sometime coming up. Anyway, I took him to this temple and we went inside. I love the temple. I still love it. I went there in February just before I left. And Mandi Mohalla, that's the area it's called in Mysore. It's where a lot of Muslim districts, sort of, where there's a lot of shops. They make jewelry, they make shoes, it's a little area. And the road is called Kali Temple Road, which always excited me because I thought maybe there was a Kali temple, but this is Chaudeshwari. And each day they dress her up in a silver-plated armor of a different Devi, but a fierce version of each Devi. It's really, really phenomenal to see. Anyway, so I took him there. We stayed inside for a while. We had prasad, did all this stuff, and then when we were coming out, putting on our shoes, there was a flyer glued on the wall above where our shoes were. And I didn't notice, I didn't look at it, and he noticed it and said, "Hey, isn't this that goddess that's on that card that Harsha gave you?" And I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, it is." Well, the sign was half in Kannada, which I couldn't read, and half in English. So I took a picture with my phone of the sign. I kept a picture of that on my laptop so I can keep it because it's very important to me. That was the kind of the first stage. Anyway, I didn't know there was a temple for this goddess in town, but this goddess had kind of eked her way into my life over the course of, at the time, 3 years. So I took the picture and then forgot to go. Didn't think about it. We were busy, and then we went home and ate dinner and blah blah blah, and that was it. And then I wasn't practicing at a shala then, just at home. He was practicing daily, and then on Sunday they were off after their morning lead class. It was maybe 2 weeks later. And he said, "So, did you ever go to that temple?" And I said, "Oh, no, I completely forgot." So we pulled up the directions, or pulled up the picture that I had taken and found the address on there. Google mapped the directions, found out it was 16 kilometers outside the city, so about 18, 20 kilometers from where we were sitting at the time. And we hopped on my scooter and we drove out there. Well, you come into the place and it's a very specific feeling. And if you know my Instagram and you know my Facebook and you know the way I write on Facebook and in other places, you know that I've posted tons of photos of this place because I have lived there for so long, and it's become home to me. But at the time, it was all brand new. It's kind of a very bumpy, boom, boom, dirt road coming around through this forest sort of looking place. And then you come around and there's like a long red flat one-story house here and then a temple over here. And so we came up, saw the people on the porch, nodded to them, but walked over to the temple. I didn't know it was their temple. I didn't know it was the protocol at the time. I wasn't really versed in all that stuff. I was used to going to temples, and this was a very different style temple. And I discovered later it was a Kerala temple, Kerala style. So it's a very different. You can't go inside. You go up to the door. And I felt a strong energy there. And it had been there at the time, I believe, for 14 or 13, 14, 15 years, something like that at the time. And so I sat there, and two people came over from the house, um, talked to us for a minute, and one said, if you want to, after you're finished at the temple, you can go and meet Guruji. Nobody's in there right now with him. So we went and met him, and I felt a strong energy around him. He's a Shakti Tantric practitioner for decades, and so he has a lot of energy. But I felt a pull, like a magnetic pull, and I didn't think much of it. I did notice it though. And we talked for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, and then we left. And he said, oh, hey, this is on a Sunday. And he said, on Tuesday, I'm doing a Purnima, which is full moon ceremony. You're welcome to come. It's at this time. So Ross couldn't, because on the full moon, happened to be Guru Purnima. And at the Shala with his teacher, who is Saraswati Patabi's daughter, they did a Guru Purnima ceremony there. So he was busy with that. So I actually took Harsha out there, and we went, and they did a homa, a homa to this goddess, which at the time I knew nothing about. Now I know quite a bit about that. And it was very powerful. I felt a whole different level of energy come into me, but also a whole lot more peace come into me. It was a very strong feeling. And so we had prasad, we talked a little bit afterwards. I think we stayed there for quite a few hours, just because it's a peaceful place to be. It's got a lot of nature there, and it's out, they have cows, they have chickens, all kinds of stuff. And then we went back in town, and a couple days later, I felt the pull to go out there again. So I went out and sat in front of the temple, meditated, and then I went and talked to the guru that was there. And I didn't even really know his name that well at the time. But every day to 2 days, I was pulled to drive out there. So I started driving out there quite a bit. And over the next week, I'd been like 3 times. And by the fourth time I was going, I decided that time, instead of going in the morning, I was going to go in the evening. Because each time I went in the morning, he was giving me prasad from the temple, which is a sweet called belladonna. It's really nice. It's like jaggery rice with some fruit in it and stuff. It's really good. But they off prasadam, in case you don't know, prasad is food or flowers or anything offered to the deity inside of a temple. That deity partakes of a bit of the essence of it, and you take it back, and then it's a blessed food, so it's considered very holy to eat. So I was eating a lot of it, and he was often watching me eat it, and then we would chat a little bit. Well, with time, so that I was getting to that, like my fourth time. I went in the evening, because their evening ceremony, Devi temples tend to have bigger goings on in the evening. And at the porch, he would sit on the kind of dais outside the front door. After he did the ceremony inside the temple, he would come on the front, sit, hand out prasad, give you kumkum for your forehead. And at the time, they used to give you red strings that you could tie around your wrist as a blessing, protection offering. And he asked me, so where are you in this I didn't know anything special about Kali Kula, Sri Vidyakula at the time. And he asked me, and I said, well, I have a sadhana I'm doing that's based on teachings from Kamakya. And he said, oh, so that's the Kali Kula. So he said, okay, good. Keep doing that. It's working for you. And from that time, I kept going out there every few days. And then they have a big full moon ceremony, new moon ceremony, sorry, Amavasya, where there's a lot of things going on. I'm not going to discuss it in this video. It's not about that. But at that time, he had decided something about me, and he offered for me to move there. And I said, yes, of course. And he wanted me to come right away, but I wished I had, but I had already been booked to fly to Germany for, I think, 5 weeks to teach, and then from there to fly to Tucson 6 months. And it wasn't like a written contract, but I had a kind of a verbal agreement that I was coming, and the ticket was already bought and all that stuff. It was, and And I felt bad that these tickets had been bought and they're non-refundable. And so I said, well, I don't think I can move right now. Anyway, we had a discussion about it. And then when I went to Tucson, what happened was COVID hit and I got stuck there and ended up being in the US for 2 years before I was able to go back. But it was a very, I won't say slow process, because over the course of 2 months, I knew that I loved him and that I wanted to learn from him. And he obviously felt the same way because he invited me to move there and learn from him. But I knew some magnetic pull was there instantaneously. So it was a very strong, profound feeling to have, because they say what you know when it's the right one, when they show up, when you feel it in your gut. It's just there. And I did. I definitely did. So that's the story of how I met my guru. Have a great evening. Bye.